could consuming salt actually be making you feel worse? There's a lot of research surrounding dietary habits and things that you either should or should not partake in when struggling with an autoimmune disease. One of the latest findings being salt. And before we dive into the nitty-gritty of what salt actually does, let's first lay a little bit of groundwork on how exactly the immune system works and the players involved. So first up, when an antigen makes its way into our system, an antigen really being anything, whether it's a bacteria or a virus, it's simply just something foreign. And when this foreign invader makes its way into our system, it gets the fancy new name of antigen. Now, once again, when that antigen makes its way into our system, an antigen presenting cell will bind to it. This antigen presenting cell's job is to go out and survey the territory, and once it comes upon something foreign, like this antigen, it engulfs that antigen and then tries to determine on whether or not we need to trigger an immune response towards it or not. If it got the whole thing, then there's no need to call in for backup, but if there's more, we may need to mount a response. In the event that it does decide that we're going to trigger an immune response, it will then release these little protein messengers called cytokines, which go and activate a group of cells called T helper cells. These T helper cells will then call on their friends who have some real fancy names. They're the cytotoxic T cells and natural killer cells. And these guys, they're basically the brute force of the immune system. Their job is to go and kill that antigen. But there's a slight problem. These cytotoxic T cells and natural killer cells have a hard time finding and locating the antigen. So what the T helper cells will do is call on the B cells whose job it is to create antibodies. Antibodies then go and attach onto the antigen, basically in an effort to help identify that antigen, making it easier for the cytotoxic T cells and natural killer cells to find and ultimately destroy that antigen. Then, once the antigen has been fully destroyed and taken care of, it's the job of the T suppressor cells to come and say, all right, enough is enough, we're done here. And then the last player we have is the T regulatory cells. And their job is to basically oversee this whole process. And in the event that maybe an antigen brings in a few more of his friends, these T regulatory cells will go and tap on the shoulder of the T helper cells in an effort to increase this immune response. Or on the other side, of the spectrum, if the antigen has been fully taken care of, these T regulatory cells, their job is to then go and tap on the shoulder of the T suppressor cells to say, all right, let's get out of here. Let's run through this one more time, and I'll use an analogy that I often use when explaining this process to my patients. So once again, the antigen makes its way into our system, and an antigen presenting cell binds to it. Think of the antigen presenting cell kind of like a mall cop. They don't have any real power, but they do have handcuffs. And so what this mall cop will do is handcuff you and put you off to the side while he then decides, what do I want to do with this person? If he decides that he does want to get the police involved, he'll do what we would all do and call the 911 dispatch, aka the T helper cells. The 911 dispatch will then send a few officers to your location, those officers being the cytotoxic T cells and the natural killer cells. But remember, these officers have a hard time finding this criminal. I don't know if that's the right word, but we'll go with it. So this criminal, they're having a hard time finding this person, let's say because it's dark. That word feeds back to the 911 dispatch and they say, no worries, I'll send you some night vision goggles. And now they can see in the dark. That's the job of the antibodies, to help identify what it is that they are actually attacking. And then our last two players would be the T suppressor cells, and this would basically be like the team leader. The team leader doesn't actually get his hands dirty, but he's watching from the sidelines, and as soon as he gets the all clear from the police chief, aka the T regulatory cells, he shuts the whole thing down. So hopefully now you have a good understanding of how exactly the immune system works. I want you to remember those terms and the players of the immune system as we tie that back into salt consumption. According to this article, they say that salt is amongst the most common dietary constituents that has increased in our diet as a consequence of the consumption of processed foods. We love salt. I remember when my grandpa was still alive, he would put salt on just about everything. But how is that a bad thing? Well, this study stated that data from animal models ubiquitously revealed a detrimental role of high sodium intake in reversing the suppressive effects of regulatory T cells and promoting a cellular shift towards T helper and Th17 pro-inflammatory phenotypes. Now, what does that actually mean? Going back to how the immune system works, the T helper cells are what promote this immune activation and destruction of the antigen. And regulatory T cells are what modulate this whole system to either call in more backup when needed or shut this whole thing down when it's not needed. And what they're saying in this article is that salt has been shown to suppress the role of these T regulatory cells and also promote the T helper cells, ultimately leading to more and more destruction. So would it be a good idea to steer away from salt? I mean, I guess the decision is yours, but it's pretty clear when in this article they state that the data suggests that salt truly stimulates certain pathological immunological processes and strengthens a directly linked influence of dietary habits on the development and progression of autoimmune disease. So if you'd like to promote the progression of your autoimmune disease, then yeah, go for it. But if not, it wouldn't be a bad idea to just cut that out of your diet. Now remember, management of an autoimmune disease is not condition specific, as in it doesn't matter if you're struggling with MS or Hashimoto's or even lupus, the concepts are the same because the underlying mechanism is the fact that your immune system has become overzealous and has begun attacking your own tissues. Although there have been studies performed on a few different illnesses so far, including things like rheumatoid arthritis, MS, psoriatic arthritis, lupus, and even Crohn's disease, all showing the same thing. That being that salt actually entices your immune system to just keep calling in more and more soldiers to destroy more and more tissue. And hopefully you can see how that would lead to an autoimmune disease or just an autoimmune flare, because eventually that antigen will be destroyed. And when that time happens and the T suppressor cells have yet to call a stop to this thing, those soldiers are going to continue to do their job. I watch a lot of UFC, and something you'll hear a lot of those fighters talk about is how even in the event that they land a big punch and that guy has absolutely no chance to coming back, they'll continue punching or strangling or whatever until the referee actually pulls them off, because they're going for the win. And until that buzzer blows, you're still in danger of losing. Same thing applies to these natural killer cells and cytotoxic T cells, that they are going to continue until they're told to stop. And if the antigen is already fully destroyed, they're going to destroy something else. And that something else will probably be your own tissue. If you're struggling with an autoimmune disease and not sure what to do next, I've created a free guide that you can download using the link below. This will walk you through step by step of exactly how I manage patients who are struggling with an autoimmune disease. I hope that you like it.